Welcome, everybody. I'm glad you guys are all here, and I don't have a very loud voice, so I'm going to try my best to get my voice out here, and then hope that the conversations kind of died down a bit. But anyway, welcome. Glad you're all here. And I know some of you have traveled a long way. One person flew out from Connecticut, isn't that right, Michael? No, you didn't. But okay, so thanks so much for everybody being here. It's a pleasure. I got good news and bad news. The good news is that my clicker is all charged up. The bad news is it's still charging. So, and it's at home, so I'm gonna have to do this manually, but that's okay. And
tell somebody to go over there and sit with your clicker.
yeah, you know, and
Just say click.
that's, but it's okay because it's close enough that I might just do this and see how it works. But at any rate,
Well, Ricky, we appreciate you taking the time to do this class. So,
well, thanks very much. You might want to save the applause until afterwards, because then it's like, okay, that was not 1 out of 5 stars. So, but thanks for the good, kind words, Jeremy. I appreciate that. All right, Shireen, who is the owner of Sage and Plow, said she'd be in here at 1 o'clock, but she's just like us, kind of on time, kind of not. When she gets here, I'll introduce her. Come on in, Rich. Just sit right here in front on the floor. Don't mind that my antennas are in your way. By the way, there was somebody that I promised an antenna to when they arrived. Who was it? Okay, here's a better question. There was someone that promised a $20 bill to. I mean, who was it? Right. Same kind of. Was it you, Charles? Yep. Okay. Well.
Copper too.
Well, here it is. But you can't have it until I'm through. So when I'm through at this class, come on and take it up. All righty. Yeah, like I said, when Shireen shows up, I'll introduce her and so forth, and blah, 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 blah. Anyway, my clicker, yeah. So the reason that we are here is to talk about antennas. I mean, that's the primary thing for this. I have found recently, on one hand, that there have been a lot of really interesting questions about antennas from a lot of people in our valley. Questions that I thought maybe people should know a little bit more about antennas than I assumed that they did. And there's a lot of things to know about antennas that's outside the exam material, and that's okay. It's just that we get some of the same questions over and over again. So my purpose is hopefully to get an army of people, that's you, to kind of help me out answering these questions. And so I want you to be, the expert. I am not the antenna expert. Let me just tell you that right off. I don't have a PhD in antennas. I don't even know there's such a thing. But I'm not that person. I know a little bit about it, and what I do know, I'm happy to share. And I'm happy that you're here listening, because I want you to take over my job and talk to everybody about antennas and tell them everything that you know, because, it's just a fun topic, and we just love antennas. All right, anyway. So this is to help you also to become comfortable with antennas and to kind of help make educated choices about antennas and such, and when we go about buying them or making them. And the scope of this class is we're going to talk about the fundamentals. And when I say fundamentals, we're going to get kind of down and dirty in antennas and understand really the very, groundwork of how antennas work and what they do and what they are and so forth. Don? Oh, no, Vern. Vern, so good to see you. Uh-oh, we'll give Jim a chance to wheel in here. Come on in, Jim.
Good morning.
If you're looking for a place...
Just sit right here.
That sounds good. All right. So yeah, we're going to get into the depths of how antennas work. Not just the very basic bones, but, at any rate, what makes them tick and how they function within an antenna system. An antenna system is kind of one of the focuses of what I wanted to talk about. So antenna system consists of not just antenna, but your feed line, your tuner, transformer, amplifier, your mast, counterpoise, we're going to talk in detail about that, grounding meters, traps, and antenna switches. All these things are a part of what I consider the antenna system. And when you talk about antennas and how they work and what you need to do to make them work, the antenna system has to be taken into account as a whole rather than just focusing on one component, which is the antenna, because that's just, if you just do that, you're going to get lost. And you're going to wonder, I just bought this thing. It's got 1.1 SWR, and it doesn't work. What's wrong? Well, it's because we didn't take these other things into account. Come on in, Jamie. And let's see. You can sit on the stand if you want. I mean, yeah, this.
Last person gets to be the record.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea. Come on in. Hey, good to see you, Aleph. Haven't seen you for a while. Still trying to pronounce your name right. All right. So one of the things that's on this antenna system is the transmission line. And when I talk about transmission line, it's any kind of conductor that we use to communicate between the transceiver and our antennas, anything between. And specifically with amateur radio, we talk about the coax because that's our main way of getting signal from the transceiver to the antenna. We also call this a feed line. So often in this presentation, when I say feed line, I'm talking about that transmission line, the coax. Okay, just keep in mind that the transmission line from the transceiver to the antenna can't only just be the coax. There are other kinds of ways to do that, but we'll be focusing a lot on coax because that's what we use. Delivers electrical signal to and from the antenna, and so coax is what's most common among us. There are other kinds available, and just kind of jumping right into it. Let me just start with the antenna. First of all, so if you guys have any questions, just say it. I'm not the kind of person that says, do you have any questions? Because I know you do. But, like Gary here, you're just bashful. You're afraid to ask. Or Mark, he just throws up his pen. He doesn't ask any questions. Don't raise your hand. Just blurt it out. We're not in primary. Okay, Mark.
Yagis are horizontally polarized.
They can be.
Yeah, they can be. And you have vertical antennas.
Okay.
So how do they both work and can work very well.
Absolutely.
So how does that polarization affect, or what principles come into play there to make one or the other work in a situation?
Very good question, and we will answer that. Okay, so, and by the way, if you need to go to the restroom, I was also directed to direct you there too, but I forget about these kinds of things. It's over there towards the front of the door. You go out into the foyer and to the right, and then there's restrooms. But boy, it's hard to find because you got to go down this corridor, make a right, go up the stairs, down this other thing, into the elevator, up and then down again, and there it is. But the restroom's not there. It's a person that you can ask, "Where's the restroom?" And then you can get there. So anyway, but it's over there somewhere. I don't know.
Somehow it does.
I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, you'll hear me say I don't know quite a bit in this class, because I don't know a lot about antennas.
Well, that was in your message on Telegram.
I didn't make that, so.
I'm an expert on restrooms. It's straight over there.
Don't listen to her. No. Thanks, Cindy. Appreciate it. Hey, Lawrence. All right, so jumping into the subject matter here. An antenna is a passive device that is, well, it's simple in its construct. It's simple in the way it looks, but boy, it's got a lot of moving parts to it, okay? It's not a trivial device. So it converts AC to radio waves, and it converts radio waves to AC. And that's essentially what an antenna does. That's it right there. In a nutshell, that's the only purpose for an antenna. That's where we have it. All right.
Noji, what's the purpose of the balun? Is that to equalize the transmission from the antenna, the transmitter to the antenna?
That's a great question, which we'll answer that too.
Yes.
Absolutely, yep. Because that's part of our antenna system. But what I want to do is start at the very fundamentals of how an antenna works, okay? And the fundamentals is, as I look at an antenna, and I've brought several of these antennas with me here. You don't have to do anything, Rich. Just don't touch my antennas. This is a signal stick antenna, and inside here there's a conductor that, well, it conducts. And so part of this conductor is it's got a piece of metal, and inside the metal there are these little atoms, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, I don't even more, okay? But in these atoms, okay, you've got electrons, and these electrons exist in these shells. There's orbitals, and there's these different thingies inside the atom that allows electrons to do certain things. Okay, some of them are the valence shell, some of them are the conductance band. And everything in the valence shell allows the atoms to bond with other atoms to make compounds and substances and so forth. But in the conductance band, which is in a little bit outside of that, you've got electrons that are free to jump from one piece of atom to another. And when they're allowed to do that, then we call that atom a metal. So this metal here has atoms that do that very thing. And that's why when you put some current on this thing, it makes these atoms have these electrons jump to another atom. And so when it does that, why, you know, that's where the magic begins. At any rate,
does it matter what the material is made of? Whether it's aluminum, stainless, carbon steel, whatever?
I tried to hook up a battery and a light bulb to glass, and it didn't work. So I think it does matter. But we'll get to that too. So it starts with charge. This is the very basic thing where antennas begin, the very bottom of all that. And when I'm talking about, when I say charge, I'm talking about either positive charge or negative charge, and specifically the negative charge, which is the electron. There are other kinds of things that have these charges. We're not going to talk about that. All we're going to talk about is the electron, because that is where everything in the antenna starts. And that's what everything we are worried about begins too. So here in charge, we have these electrons that exist in these atoms that are able to jump around. And they're the very fundamental property, what we're talking about here, electrons and protons. And what surrounds a charge, okay, they attract or they repel each other because of a field that they generate. And this field is the electric field. And this electric field is everywhere present, well, most everywhere present. And so because of the electric field, this is how charges actually interact with other pieces of metal, other charges, and as they do their magic, this electric field I'm going to refer to many times. This is a down deep, dirty mess of how antennas really start, the physics behind it. So they attract and repel, and when you have charges that actually move around, then we call that current. So anytime you have a conductor, the charge, that, you know, electron that jumps in the conduction band of an atom from one atom to the next and next, as they move like that, that's called current. And that's the definition, in fact. So when we got current, that means we got electricity. And electricity means we have electrical energy flowing in this thing. Kind of magic. So, and then current, because of Ørsted's law, there's a guy back in Holland, and I can't even pronounce his last name very well. It's Ørsted. Yeah. And he discovered that current in a wire actually creates a magnetic field. And you've seen that in classroom. You know, you put a little coil around a nail, you know, and you can put it on a battery and you can pick up some paper clips. You know, that's Ørsted's law. So magnetic field there. So I hope this whiteboard works for me. I hope I can erase things on it, but anyway, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a really small circuit here. Here's a battery, and on this battery I'm going to put a little switch. There we go. And I'm going to put wires going clear out to there. I don't know if it's going to be hard for you guys to see over there. I'm just starting to get used to this whiteboard. Thank you very much. I have to keep pressing that every so often. I don't know why. Okay, so over here, I'm just going to measure the voltage on this wire. And this is where the quiz comes in. Tom, where are you? All right, so here we are, battery. Let's say the battery is, I don't know, how many volts? I heard him say 10 volts. Is that what you said? 13. He did. Okay, so 10 volt battery, let's say, I don't know. And a 10 volt battery, I've got a switch on here. So right now, I'm measuring the voltage on the end of this wire, pair of wires. What voltage am I measuring here? How much? Zero. Who said 10? Drop and give me 20. All right. But we should see 0 volts in that voltmeter, right? Okay. That's okay. To your credit, it's going to get trickier. I'm a tricky guy. All right. So now, yes, I mean, there's 10 volts across here, but because the switch is open, and there we measure this wire, there's 0 volts across there. But now we go ahead and close this switch. Put this little thing like that. There. The switch is closed, and right then and there, what's the voltage across that voltmeter?
0. There's little lines
Minus the
right there.
loss of the wire. You're gonna have some, you're
You
gonna
got
have
ohms
some.
left.
Let's say the wire is 0 ohms.
10.
Incorrect. Who else said 10? Come on. Be brave.
Up to 10.
Don't be afraid to be the bad guy, okay? So who said 0? How many say 0? How many say 10? Okay, so one person says, why'd you say 0?
Because your line's not connected.
Yeah, your lines aren't connected. I'm confused
Well,
on the
the
drawing.
voltmeter's connecting, you're connecting.
Well, okay, wait a minute. So are there any wires connected between these two ends of my battery? Okay, but if I measure it, how many volts am I measuring?
Depends on the battery.
Oh, it's 10 volt battery. Well, give or take.
1.5.
So right here, as I'm, so now I've lost the touch. There we go. If I'm measuring it at the battery right here, I should see 10 volts on that voltmeter. All right. When I close the switch, you're telling me that I should see how many volts, Gary?
Well, it's just how you've drawn it, but if you are measuring it, if you are connected to it, you should see 10 volts.
Well, I am trying to measure it. I mean, that's how I measure a battery, right? Just pretend like, So I should see, but you just backtracked. You said 0.
I said 0. He said, I don't know what he said.
I thought I heard Gary say 0. Okay, you said 0. You said 0 too, Mark.
Right, and I said 0.
Okay.
At what time are you measuring it? Because it takes time for that.
So what? So no, that is actually the accurate question, because that's exactly what I said. Is when the very moment that I close that switch, what is the voltage at this point here? And Mark, what is the answer?
It's 0. It's nothing yet, right?
So
You
it's
haven't reached it yet.
all right. That is the correct answer. It is still 0 because it takes time for that energy to go down this wire, right? Because okay. So you might think, okay, this is semantics, right?
You're not that fast.
No.
That's true, But assuming the voltmeter is already there at the, while I'm closing that switch. Matthew,
Reggie, is that because of the velocity factor? It takes forever to get
that's exactly why. Yes, the velocity factor in what?
the wire, the type of wire you're using. Because copper has a different velocity factor.
You're telling me that just plain old wire has velocity factor? I know 2 physicists that will argue with you and tell you you're wrong. The fact is they're wrong, okay? Because they've been proven wrong. This is old. This is like 1897. But anyway, so yeah, you're right. There's velocity factor in any conductor because it takes time for this current to travel, right? So it's a very second, the very moment that I close the switch, you're still going to see 0 volts here because it takes time for that energy to go down that wire. So, and then also Matthew answered the other question I wanted to ask, and it was how long did it take? Speaking of Matthew, we have 3 Matthews in here. And actually, your name is Paul Matthews. So there's technically 3 Matthews. So anyway, welcome. That means that if it takes time for that current to reach the end of that wire, well, why does it not just be infinite fast? I mean, it's just a wire, right?
It's kind of like a water pipe. You start the water, and it takes time for the water to flow to the end.
Okay, all right, let's take that water pipe example. So in the back of my house, I've got this garden hose hooked to my faucet, okay? And at the end of my garden hose, I've got this this sprayer, and it's turned off. It's not. I don't have my thing, pressed on it, but it's hooked to my faucet, and so, but it's filled with air because there's nothing in it right now, and so right away when I go and open that faucet up, whoosh, is there any water going into that hose?
Yes.
Yeah.
And you know that by experience. However, I can tell you're not a physicist because if you were, you'd say, nope, can't have any water because you know, because because of the air and it's capped off, and so forth, right?
Water is not
Pressure is there,
compressible.
and the air pressure builds up until it won't let any more water in.
So it goes.
You open
No,
the
it
nozzle,
equalizes.
So you're saying though that there is some water that can go into that hose, right?
Yes.
Well, okay. How long does it take for that water to get there?
depends
As
on what
long
city
as
you live
it
in.
takes.
Depends on the water pressure.
Say that again. Actually, say that again.
What's that?
Say that again.
Depends on the water pressure. And depends on what city you live in.
Okay, that's not the answer I thought I heard. Bzz. Okay, no, that's true. But so yeah, there's a lot of physical factors that come into explaining why. Okay, now the thing is, no water should get into that hose because there's nowhere for that water to go. I mean, it's all capped off at the end. There's nothing to escape, right? So, but it does, by experience, we know the water does get into the hose, and that's the way it goes.
Well, air is compressible, water is not.
Okay. So,
But there's voltage in the wire.
so then continuing this analogy with this wire here, I'm going to get really good at flicking this thing off, okay? So where does the current go if there's no path? How in the world do we have current going from there down to here? If there's
No, it doesn't have a path until it gets to the end.
Wait a minute, do you know its name? How do you know that it knows anything? I mean, it doesn't have a brain, does it? But still,
It doesn't know it doesn't exist until it gets to the end.
okay, so it's traveling, is what you're saying. The current is traveling down there? Okay, how fast does it travel, Mark?
Depends on the propagation velocity.
Kind of like what Matthew was saying, right? What are you going to say there, Joe?
Well, it takes, so the whole time thing is how long it takes for that one electron to bounce from atom to atom to atom to get to the end of the wire,
Okay,
or to loop back around through your voltmeter back to the battery.
okay, you've seen a Newton's cradle, right? All right, so it's a bunch of balls in hanging, and so I just go,
Kinetic
right?
energy.
Okay, yeah, and so what you find out is that the balls can move quite slowly because of the swing of the pendulum, but as soon as it hits, it's like instantaneously, this one comes out. But it's not instantaneous because we know physics and what? What is, therefore, if it's not the ball transferring, what is it just transferring from one to the end?
Energy.
It's the energy. And that's the point I want to make. Saber, you had a question?
Yes, I thought the speed of the electrons is not a current. That's the number of electrons going through per second. But the electric field is the speed of the current. It can't go at the speed of light like it can for a radio wave, I don't think, because it's still bound to the electrons.
You are totally correct because the speed of electrons is very slow. In fact, if you ever saw one, I've never seen one, but they go pretty slowly. I've seen one in a cloud chamber. I used to make a little petri dish thing where I put a little piece of, what do you call it? Dry ice, and you can put a piece of phosphorus in there and you can see electrons go, pa-choo, pa-choo. I mean, they don't even go a couple miles an hour. Okay, they would go very slowly. That's how fast electrons travel. But if that's true, how is it that electricity can propagate in wires so quickly? In fact, Matthew was saying, certain percentage of the speed of light, right? Is that what you were getting to, Mark?
It travels at 270,000 kilometers per second.
That depends on the
Depends on the medium.
on the medium, doesn't it? Yeah. And in a copper wire, how fast does it travel?
Well, that's what it says.
What's around the copper wire? Because
I don't know.
it changes.
And as a matter of fact, we can. The next class we have, we'll actually talk about that because that's the dielectric between it and free space. But that's here and there. So you're absolutely right.
Don't you have to get the resistivity of the material and then get the resistance of the wire and check on other impedance to know how fast it would go?
Resistivity does not affect speed, but you're right. It's something that needs to be taken into consideration. What does affect speed is the kind of material it is and how well the electron can jump from one atom's conduction band to the next one. Okay, now, so yeah, what happens here then is that this current does not travel at infinite speed to get here. It travels at the velocity factor, which is going to be pretty dang fast. In fact, in copper wire, it's usually between 0.951 and 0.96 times the speed of light, which is pretty dang fast. You know, PDF, right? Pretty dang
And
fast.
the factor difference between the material of the metal.
Yeah, and so if it was aluminum, it would be even slower and so forth, right? Copper is pretty dang fast. So, I mean, different. Do you have any materials memorized that whose velocity factors you have in your head? I don't either, but those are two that I know just because I left class and I went, what is it, quick, before class starts. You know? So there you go. So in this copper wire here, it goes pretty fast, and it doesn't reach this place in an infinite time. And then we did answer this other question. Mark helped us answer the fact that what did travel down here was the energy. But when the energy got to this point, then it stopped. So this is exactly how an antenna works. Wait a minute, how did I jump from this to an antenna, right? So what I do is this. So I'm taking a battery, I'm going to put it on just like this right here, and now I'm going to watch this current as I close the switch. Well, in fact, I'm going to just get rid of the switch, leave it closed, and I'm going to take the battery, apply it to this wire, and then the voltmeter is going to watch it here. And then right away, I'm going to flip the battery over. And then what is it going to do? It's going to do just the opposite. It's going to go the other way, right? Suddenly the current's going to go there, and it's going to stop. Then I'm going to flip it back, just like that, right? And as I do that, and in fact, if I do it like 146 million times a second,
Alternating current.
so my hand can't go that fast, but I tried this morning. It almost broke my arm. And yeah, that's alternating current because our current is actually going in different directions, opposite direction and forward direction. Yeah. And in this case, it's more like a square wave. It's pretty bad.
Probably a DC power noise.
Yeah. So anyway. All right.
I'm just trying to say some of this with my own words.
Okay.
So I understand it. So, for example, when you flip the switch down, the energy actually goes down the wire.
Yes.
And then it actually stops because you
no
haven't completed the circuit. But when you flip the battery, then it actually is going to suck back in.
Suck is a good word, but yeah, we could apply that. It's going to go in the opposite direction, right? Turn it around?
I understand that
Yeah.
go back and forth, but I'm trying to make sure I understand that actually the current actually does go down there, and then it doesn't know where to go after that.
Doesn't know where to go? Your electrons are like marks, okay? You guys might have like personalities invested in these electrons. I don't know. Okay, but you're right. The electrons will not know where to go, okay? They just end up there because of the laws of physics say, I can't go any farther. There's nowhere to jump to, right?
I think I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, and
thank you, and you did it the second time now. Thank you.
so does that help you?
Yes.
It's helping me because I'm like, wow, I'm not sure I understand Gary's brain, but that's really good. Because see, what it does for me, Gary, is it helps me to explain it better the next time. See, well, 1 year from now, you see, we'll have this class and I'll go, hey, Gary said this, I got this, I know how to explain it now. Sabre got a question, and then Dawn.
Yes, so like we know for a radio wave itself that like the oscillations, that's not moving, that's just energy that's where the intensity is changing at different points. So we know the electrons are moving, but is the current itself actually moving, or is the intensity just changing like up and down the wire?
We will talk about that, but the answer is both. Because you have to have intensity changing, or else you won't have Faraday's law, which says, well, you got to be able to receive. In order to receive a signal, it has to be changing, and then you got to experience it within a wire. And so that's how you actually receive that signal. But for your first part of your question, that current definitely is moving. But if there's no closed circuit, how can you have current moving at all? But this is exactly how an antenna does work. There's not a closed circuit, because if it is, then you'd short it out, and it's like, you know, you can blow up your battery. Poor battery.
Does the length of the coax affect that?
It does. It does indeed. Yeah. Okay. Whoa. You just now appended it before I answered it. Say that again. Because the answer to that second question was no. Say it again.
Because of the speed of the
It does not change the speed. It does change how it behaves.
Okay.
Okay. So coax the length of the coax does change the characteristic of the signal. It does not change how fast things are going.
No, it wouldn't change the speed, but it will change the length of the time.
Yes, absolutely, right?
Like a longer freeway.
Yep.
Same speed, but just different distance.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate that. Don, go ahead.
To answer real quick the question the gentleman was trying to ask earlier, the most conductive single element is silver. So obviously we're not going to make antennas out of silver. The second most conductive
Throw my silver antennas away.
That's why we use copper as the element. So when he was asking if there's a difference, yeah, there's a difference in conductivity of different metals. But then there's gold, and obviously we're not going to make gold antennas unless we're Donald Trump. And then there's aluminum antennas, which have their own problem. So that's why we use copper though, as the most common element.
Okay.
It's cheaper.
Yeah,
Right, the cost is a cost factor.
Very
It's
good.
the second most conductive. So anyway, that like I said, I don't want to dwell on that.
No, that's good. That's good input. And
You
Don,
can look that up online. You can just say, what's the most conductive element? It'll just give you a list. There's some really exotic, weird elements that on that list.
I'll ask you a question right now that I'll answer next week. Can we make an antenna out of string?
Like paper, thread string?
Yeah, kite string.
I don't
Yes,
know,
but it
but
won't go
that's
very
what I
far.
So I'm seeing some people like this, some people like this, some people going in circles.
Depends on the frequency in which you want to operate.
Anyway, depending on how tight you pull it.
If it was wet, it would be conductive.
It has to be conductive.
So some of you guys might have run into there's a ham radio group called the Wet Noodle Antenna Group. Okay, yeah, you've seen that, all right. And these guys have done amazing things with string antennas. Okay, it's like wow, it's a wet noodle essentially. But yep, you're totally right. All right, we're not going to get into that. All right, let's see. We've dwelled on this way too much, but it's an important topic. You know, I'm going to say that a lot. This is important. Well, it's all important, so otherwise I wouldn't be here. All right. Did Janine come with you?
She's shopping.
Okay. My heart was going to drop. I'm going, you made it all the way over here in those 2 wheels? Okay, 4, but wow. Welcome, Jim. All right. So initially, no voltage appears at the end. Okay, and I say appears at the end. All right. So at switch time, no voltage at the end, but there's a very high current at the switch, and we know that because of our familiar equation, right? The current equals the voltage divided by the resistance. Resistance is very low in that wire. I mean, it's pretty dang low. And come on in, Lily. And the lower the resistance, the higher that current, and it's going to be very huge current. Probably won't feel a whole lot if you were to touch it, but still, high current. Anyway, eventually then the voltage does appear at the end, but after how long? And after how long is called the velocity factor. And that plays into a lot of things that we do. And I'm not talking about coax, okay? When I'm talking about velocity factor in this thing, I'm talking about how long does it take for me, when I go back to my circuit here, when I apply my voltage on my wire for it to reach the end of my antenna. And that time that it takes to go from here to there is everything about what we're talking about in this course. And that time is the velocity factor of the antenna. And this is how antennas work. If my voltage, if my current went from the very bottom to the very top instantaneously, then this one, we couldn't even do radio. Radio would not be possible. Okay, it's only possible because of 2 things. Number 1, there's a difference in current between here and here. And number 2, there's a magnetic field, thank you, Orsted, that comes about from that current that's changing all the time. And that changing magnetic field is where radio happens. So, all right.
Okay, so I'm going to work this out again.
Yeah, no, go ahead, please.
Electricity, so this is a question. Electricity basically travels a little less than the speed of light.
Depending on the medium.
And the medium also has all those little 0.0 digits after it. Okay.
I thought it's so close that they just use the speed of light.
Yeah, in conductive medium, electricity travels pretty close to the speed of light. I mean, 0.96 is pretty close to the speed of light. Is that what you mean, Gary?
Yes.
Okay, Don.
I hear people asking questions and saying things just real quick.
Yeah.
The speed of light is that we read in the textbooks is the speed of light in a vacuum.
Yes.
Light it's called retardation, and I know that's not politically correct, but that's the word. Like when that light comes through those windows, it slows down. It's like trying, if you're going through a swimming pool and you dive into the pool and you swim, you slow down because of the resistance of the water. And then when you leave the pool, you can walk at full speed again. So as light goes through media, it slows down and then speeds up again. That's the strangeness of the phenomenon of the wave particle fabric. So anyway, and it's the same thing with electricity. Depends on the resistance of the media and the electrical properties of the media that's going through. So silver, gold.
Not the resistance, but the electricity, the material properties, yes.
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
I knew what you meant.
But no, you're right to correct me. And apparently, like silver has that one electron in the outer shell. It's easily transferable, which makes it very conductive. Anyway, but that it's just something. It's just that people don't necessarily realize that the speed of light actually varies depending upon the media that's traveling.
That's a very good point. Thank you very much.
Even the atmosphere, it slows down as it's going through the atmosphere.
And that's why prisms work the way they do, right?
Right. Well, that's refraction.
Yes, that's refraction. Yeah, it's a little more to that. Sorry, Ayla? Who was it talking?
That's why stars twinkle.
Why stars twinkle.
Yeah. In space, they don't twinkle.
All right.
Here on Earth, like you said, travels through the atmosphere and causes the stars to twinkle.
I believe there's a different reason why they twinkle, all right? I think it's because my wife is near me, you know, or whatever. But anyway, so we won't cover that in this class. Just saying. All right. Let me just stop and mention one term that I'm just going to use it quite a bit, and I've been using is RF. When I say RF, I'm talking about radio frequency, and I'm not talking about just a wave. Okay, when I say radio frequency, I'm talking about not the. I'm talking about how fast the oscillations are going back and forth, but specifically electrical or electromagnetic. In other words, in the wire and in space. Those are two different things, but when I say RF, I can be talking about electrical RF or spatial RF. And so when it's inside my little antenna here going back and forth and things, that's electrical. Still RF, or radio frequency, but when it leaves the antenna, that's a different kind of energy, and that's also RF. But when I say RF, I could be saying either one of these things. In industry, most people, when they say RF, they're talking only about the electromagnetic radiation. And here, I'm going to say both because they're both involved and they're both integral to what we need to know about antennas. So alternating current, first of all, someone did mention this. Alternating current means that it alternates between positive and negative. So if I was to draw, let's see if this is going to work. Where's Sylvia? She's not here. Okay, here it goes. Oh, okay, here. All right. It takes time to do it. Okay, I know, right? So, what I'm doing is I'm drawing a waveform that looks like a sinusoid on the whiteboard here. And if I asked you, is this AC or DC? What's the answer? AC. And the answer is you don't know. It depends on where the 0 point is, right? The offset. Because here, if I said, oh, it's this, then you know it's DC. Okay, it's pulsating DC. How do I know that, Mark?
You have to have a reference point.
Okay, and this is my reference point. So I'm saying that this is going to be 0 volts is my reference here. Okay, and so I'm saying because of this is DC. Am I right?
I would say it's alternating current with a positive offset.
Oh, come on. Okay, so you're saying with the bias, right? Okay, this is actually a definition of DC. And DC means that it's only traveling in one direction. The fact that this is not crossing that 0 point means it's going in one direction more and less, but it's only going in one direction. And that's a definition of DC. And I want to get this clear because as we talk about alternating current, we have to understand that alternating current means it has to go in the opposite direction as well as the forward direction. So that's where I'm getting to. So if I said that this waveform is down here, then we know for sure this is AC because it goes forward and backwards as well because of the 0 point there. Oops, don't touch the whiteboard. So the whole point is that you just have to know that AC in our antenna stuff means that current is going in both directions. Jeremy.
So it's always a wave, it's just a matter of whether the wave goes back and forth.
That's right.
And one more, if you could see the current going high current down to lower current, is it actually a wave or is the wave expressing high and low current?
It depends on the oscilloscope. I can get that out and maybe look at it and see. It might be a waveform that looks, like this. Who knows? So I don't know.
Well, the wave just expresses, though, the high and low current. It's not actually a wave going through space.
It can be.
Can be.
Yes, it can be. And in fact, it can be a wave that has a bunch of things superimposed on it. And that's kind of how we do AM, all right? And if we can mix it up a little bit and change the frequency, that's FM. So yes, it can be.
If it was true AC, you'd have more of a squared pattern than a wavy pattern.
Oh, we're not even going to get into that.
Okay.
So, but I know what you're talking about. That's beyond the scope of this. I like to say that a lot. It's beyond the scope of this course. Did I hear a grunt? If someone passes out, I don't want to hear about it, okay?
Who knows if they're snoring?
That happens a lot when I teach, snoring and things, so yeah. I'm getting this. All right, very good. So RF electrical signals are AC. When we talk about RF in our coax or on our antenna wires of any kind, our transmission lines, they are AC. So as you can see from this little diagram here, what's going on is that, and I know some people can't see like Sabra, but Don, I hope you can describe it a little bit. Here is the generator. That's simply like our transceiver, and it's simply generating our alternating current going back and forth in this coax. And it's being sent to this dipole. And the dipole is simply, you can see the current is all going in one direction or all going in the other direction. But alternating current, that's what it does. All going one direction, all going the other direction. It's a big dance like a hula, back and forth, huh? That's what it does. And as it does that, then it creates these little fields here. And these fields are, like I mentioned before, it starts with the electric field, but also because of Ampere's law, there's also a magnetic field that's along with it because it's a changing magnetic field. So anyway.
So the blue line is the magnetic field.
The blue line inside the wire is current. The blue shaded area is the current field. Okay, this just, so what the blue area is, sorry, I shouldn't say that. That's a purist way of looking at it. Anyway, what it is pretend like this blue shaded thing, you're looking at an oscilloscope and you're looking at what the current is anywhere along this line. So here it's it's kind of small, here it's larger and larger, and over here it reaches a maximum. Okay, that's kind of what we want to look at it as. Okay, that's the high current on this little wire. So this wire has high current here, very low current there. At the same time, this red is showing you the voltage at that very moment. So that means that on the ends, the voltage is very high sometimes, but here it's almost always zero. So the voltage is very low. I shouldn't say completely zero. There's a step function I'm not even going to mention, but very low here. Anyway, and then, but high current, low voltage, high voltage, low current. And the reason I mention this and I show this to you is because you need to see both of them at the same time for two reasons. Number one, you need to know that number one, these two things, the voltage and the current, are out of phase. They're not in phase with each other. And that's on purpose, and that's the way it works, because when it's out of phase, that's when antennas start to work. Next time. Anyway.
90 degrees, right?
What's that?
90 degrees.
Absolutely 90 degrees. No, it's exactly, because what you got is essentially is that if you got for instance, if you got a capacitor, if this is capacitance, okay, then we say that the capacitance is going to equal to, that the current across a current through a capacitor is going to be C dV dt, okay, and so the voltage across that capacitor is going to be like, for instance, the sine of some value, okay. Then the derivative is going to be of any sine wave is going to be a cosine of that same thing. And so because one's a sine, which is this voltage, one's a cosine, which is the current right here. Sine and cosine they're the same signal. They're just differ by 90 degrees. That's all, and that's where we get the 90 degrees from. That's where it comes. I'm not trying to confuse you, but that's where it comes from, Gary. I'm going to erase it before anyone faints. There we go. Okay.
Voltage and the current in AC are always out of phase.
No, in this dipole, it's out of phase. Yes. Don.
The other thing is that this is a two-dimensional slice of a three-dimensional.
Yeah, thanks.
It's like if you took a sphere, a ball, and then you cut it and slice out of it, you'd see a circle. So we're looking at a two-dimensional representation, but actually it vibrates in 3 dimensions.
It does.
That it's confusing for some people to look at that, but you have to remember that's a wave that's actually propagating and pulsating in 3 dimensions.
That's right. And this red and this blue pretty much all is confined on this wire. And so you're right. Eventually it does result in a wave that comes off it. We haven't got to that point yet because right here, what makes that wave then is going to be, the Maxwell Ampere law. Anyway, so those things make it happen. But right now, all we're doing is confining our discussion to the current in here. And I just wanted you to see what's going on. And what's going on is that you've got a bunch of current, alternating current going through here, and it ends up actually bunching up over. You see those little pluses over here? Bunch of positive charges building up, and then a bunch of negative charges building up. But they're more built up on the ends over here because of higher voltage, higher current, and so forth. And that's what they do, is they build up on the end. But they don't have any place to go because it's not a complete circuit. So they end up building and then releasing, building and releasing. There's no place for it to go. However, even though there's not a true path for an electrical circuit for these electrons to go, there's other things we can make advantage of, and that's where the other physical laws come in, because as they do bunch up, then they'll create a field, and that field gets propagated outward, like what Don, I guess maybe, or Gary was talking about. And when that field gets propagated out, that's when we have radio waves. So let me just, this is kind of a break here. Sorry, feel free to.
Want me to try and play with your whiteboard?
What's wrong with it?
I was gonna have him reset the timeout on it, so you don't have to keep clicking it.
Does it bother you that much, Cindy?
Yes, sir.
Okay, feel free.
So the RF has to do with setting the timeout on the screen there.
It does, yes, very much. I bet you didn't know that, too. Yes, sir.
From what you just said, where the electrons bunch up at the ends, and that's where the radio waves are created. So does that mean that
they're created anywhere that there's an electron?
Okay.
But the more there are, the more greater the field, right?
The greater the field, the greater the propagation?
What do you mean propagation?
The signal.
Like
the output of the signal.
How far, how much, speed? What do you mean by propagation? I'm not sure what you mean.
How well it... Intensity? How well it...
Intensity, is that what you mean?
How well it radiates.
Okay, and we will talk about that, how well it radiates question, because that's one of many different parts of your question there. We're going to have to slice up a bit, if you don't mind.
Well, while he's doing that, just real, so the field created by those electrons moving.
Yes.
That field that's created.
The electric
is
field.
Your, I'll just say RF in free space.
Absolutely. Yes, yes.
Okay.
That's exactly what it is.
Where they bunch up, I know this is stepping ahead, but I'll take a shot. But at one point along the antenna is where most of it goes out.
You're exactly right.
Not the whole.
No, no.
Like
When you saw that blue bunch up over here in the middle, that's exactly where the higher intensity, the highest intensity of that field comes from, is in the center of that antenna. You're very right.
So Yoshi, what did the blue represent again?
You know, when one slide goes away, I just kind of forget. But no, I'm Glenn. So you're not Glenn.
I'm Clarence.
Sorry, it's Clarence. It's been a while. So the blue represented the current in the wire. So we haven't even talked about the field yet, except we had to bring it up a bit. But yeah, that was just the currents in the wire. The little blue arrows were showing you the direction of the current and the intensity. The little blue shaded area was showing you the intensity at the very location along the wire. That's all. Hey, if it kicks you, don't worry, it's kicked me, so.
I don't know what to do. I'm sorry.
I keep saying that every class I come to.
I've got one more screen in there. I can go see.
No, don't worry. That's okay. So I stayed up late last night. Well, okay, it wasn't late, but you know what? I decided that for the purpose of this class, I would make a dipole, and so I did. Because I mean, they're not hard to make, right? They're only 2 wires connected to coax, and so that's what I did. I made a 2-meter dipole, and here it is, little thing. Doesn't do a whole lot. It's not much to look at. It's just 2 wires. All right. There's nothing in between. All right. Nothing in the back there, but it's just 2 wires. One wire is connected to the center conductor of the coax. The other wire is connected to the shield of the coax. That's it. Nothing more. See? And so I just use this for demonstration purposes. So now if I were to connect this to a radio, then you would see this magic field just emanate from this dipole, just like you saw in the diagram. Well, if your eyes were meant to see it, I guess. I couldn't see it last night, so I'm hoping you could. But this is a dipole, and it was, according to my calculations, at least cut for 2 meters. I would hope that it's correct. At any rate, so there you go. Dipole, very simple to make. Do you think something like this would actually work?
Let's try it.
Some saying no, some saying yes. Thanks for your faith, okay? But at any rate, now I just happen to know, though, that this thing doesn't work all that well because it's actually oriented in the wrong way. So here, if I orient it this way, suddenly it works great, okay? Well, yeah, well, I tried talking to a repeater. It's like, what, you're really scratchy, I can't hear you very well. Try doing something different. Oh, now you sound wonderful. You're full quieting into the blah, 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 blah. Okay.
The antenna works no matter which way you hold it. It's just the way you hold it is the big difference.
Right, right. Or maybe it's me.
It's always you.
I'm a conductor. My father before me was a conductor. But anyway, yeah, it could be just me. I've been electrocuted a couple times. It's true. Yes. So, but that's all it has. That's all it is. It's just a coax. There's nothing connected. It's just a dipole, and I think it works okay, but I don't know.
Noji, you used lead and tin to join your copper pieces together, didn't you?
That's true. I did. In fact, it was
Affects the propagation velocity as well.
tiny bit. It's so insignificant, though, that.
Well, why didn't you just use copper?
Yeah, well, my copper welding was just not up to snuff, you know. But to your point, though, I did do that with this antenna. So my copper skills, welding skills, are okay on that. On this, not so much. I would probably have burned this thing up, but thanks.
Georgie,
Sir.
is the reason that it performs better vertically because the repeater that you were trying to talk to's antenna is vertical?
Yes, that's exactly
My
right.
understanding is that they need to match.
They need to
There's
match.
nothing magic about vertical. If the repeater's antenna was horizontal and yours is horizontal, it would work the same.
Well, I don't know. I live by magic. So, you know, everything I talk about in ham radio, it's magic to me. So I think there's some magic to it. But yes, in general, what I'm looking for is orientation. And really, this is just nomenclature. And when I say orientation, I mean the physical, you know, placement of my antenna or whatever, okay? That's what I mean by orientation. And people like to think that when I have my antenna like this, that it's horizontally polarized. Well, the antenna is not polarized, okay? You don't polarize an antenna. The antenna is oriented horizontally. Okay, semantics, Noji, you're just, you know, coughing up words. Yeah, maybe so. Okay, but I just wanted to get it clear because as I start talking in this class about orientation and polarization, I want you to know what I'm talking about. We're on the same language, okay? So orientation is the physical alignment of your antenna, whereas polarization is the alignment of the actual radiated, your radio waves are polarized. Okay, that's what when we say polarized.
This way, or this way?
That's right. And the answer is which travels that way? What is it that's traveling? Or
The radio wave,
what part of the radio waves?
The electrical wave.
the electrical wave.
Yeah, you know that they're made of both magnetic and electric waves, right? Which one is it?
One cannot exist without the other.
That's true. And yeah,
Their polarizations are opposite each other.
Right, one goes this way, one goes this way.
yeah. Andre Marie and Pierre, I can't even say his name. He's French, you know. I mean, I could barely say French fries. So he found out that one cannot exist without the other. But which one is it we're talking about when we say polarization?
The electrical field.
It was a question for this mark, not this mark. No,
I got confused on which mark you were talking about.
that's true. But you were right on the mark. So.
The horizontal mark, not the vertical mark.
Okay. No, that's true. So Mark was right that it is according to the electric field, not the magnetic field. Does that really matter? Who cares, right? I care. And of course, you know, we care in this class because that's what we're kind of alluding to, is that electric field is what matters, because electric field, as long as we know that's aligned properly, that's what we're going to get the best signal for our antennas. So if I know that that Jamie is over there listening with her radio, and she's got a radio like this with her antenna pointed out horizontally, okay, and she's got a horizontal orientation, I need to point mine this way too, so that we can have the most optimum signal pointing at each other. Okay, and that way we have the electric field, and that's what this does, is it actually aligns the electric field going this way, where the magnetic field is going in this direction. Okay, anyway, blah, 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 blah. Details and details, oh no. Cindy?
Sorry, that was fun. It'd be nicer for you.
Everything was going great until people from Florida. What is your name, by the way?
I'm Joseph.
Joseph? Okay, Joseph. Okay.
No, G, since you've got a few extra minutes.
Oh yeah, sure. Go ahead, Brent.
So my question is, take your signal stick there.
And what?
Just hold it up for a second.
Oh, right.
So if we take that antenna and we attach 40 feet of line to it.
Yes.
My question's always been, where does the antenna begin and end? Like, what makes that portion of this metal, now 40, 1 feet long, what makes that the antenna and not the feed line as part of the antenna?
I want everybody to hear that question, okay? So what Brent just said, and it's not a simple answer. What Brent just asked now is, he's attaching 40 feet of coax to this little antenna right here, and he's going, well, where does the antenna begin and the feed line end? Okay, that's a great question, and we will answer that. Well, okay. Well, actually, we will actually address that a little bit today. But what it is, though, is that actually a feed line can become part of the antenna. We don't want it to be, but it can be, and it often is.
It depends on where you buy your coax. We had a facility.
That's not inaccurate.
Yeah, no, we had a facility that it was radiating out through the coax, because they bought all their coax from Radio Shack or cheap stores like that.
Yeah.
We had to go in because the FCC was complaining.
Oh, yeah.
We had a nightmare on our hands. That was the old motion picture studio.
Oh, okay.
In Provo, until we
Ventura? Or?
No, not Motion Studio.
Oh.
Okay.
It's now LDS Motion Picture.
Okay, all right.
There in Provo, just
Yeah.
behind the thing. But yeah, it was, we had terrible coax TV signals in there. But they had done their own thing after we had gone in and done it right.
Yeah, there's a bunch of manufacturers that don't know how to make coax and
Or splitters, and taps, and all that stuff.
and more.
The whole thing was radiated.
The one thing I was thinking of was a circulator. I was like, oh my gosh. Anyway, so yeah, you're right. And Brent, yes, where it begins, where it should begin is right here and end right here, and where the coax should end right there too. But
We've always talked about we don't want signal coming back on our feed line.
That's right.
And getting to our radio or
Right.
receiver. But yeah, how does it know what the difference is between the feed line and
So it doesn't have a brain, so it doesn't know, but we might know, and we might have to know how to mitigate that, right? So what is that called, that phenomenon you're talking about?
Tuning. No.
Not quite. Close.
Forget the term, but I know what
It starts with a Q. I'm just kidding. It starts with a C. It's common mode current.
Yeah.
But at any rate, yeah, we can.
That feed.
That thing. Yep. All right. So let's see. Where am I?
Hey, Najee, then should you keep your coax as short as possible?
You don't have to if you know what you're doing. It depends. Okay.
Don't say it depends on old people.
That's true. I keep forgetting, Stan. I should be more sensitive to you. But the answer is honestly yes. You should keep it as short as possible because of the loss, not because of any propagation question. But yes, because of loss, we should keep it as short as possible. All right. So the antenna current flow determines the signal polarization. So when we do have, current flow in the antenna, okay, that's what determines where the polarization happens. We'll get to that in a second too. So just want to let you know that when we model antennas, this is the typical model. There are other ways to look at antennas and a circuit equivalent of an antenna. This one is most convenient because it's all in series. It's kind of nice to look at. It's kind of cool because it explains a lot of things for us, especially in here. Okay, you have a capacitance and inductance in series. They can be in parallel. In this thing, I'm just going to put it in series because you can make an equivalent out of it. And we have a radiation resistance and an ohmic resistance. Those are the four typical components to an antenna model that we talk about. And it makes it convenient for us because it tells us which part of it is actually important. And that's the thing we need to maximize. Is that your child? Sorry. Remind me of your name.
Josh.
Josh. You don't mind if I close the door to you? Okay. I just thought maybe you wanted to hear. Okay, so just in a nutshell for now, I'll just kind of make this spoiler and give it away here. But the capacitance and the inductance, which exists in every antenna, we don't want that to be there. But unfortunately, it's a sad state of physics. And so what we try to do is we cancel them out. But the problem is the cancellation can only occur at one frequency. We'll get to that. But then we have what's remaining is the ohmic resistance and the radiation resistance. The ohmic resistance is the one thing that actually is given off as heat. So when current goes through this, okay, then the current goes through the ohmic resistance. That's simply heat giving off the antenna. I mean, anyone ever, transmitted through one of these antennas and then felt it get warm? Oh.
Yeah, holding an antenna and transmitting it.
I'm not talking about, I'm not talking about RF burns, but does it actually get, heat warmth? Can you feel it warm? You should not, because if you do, that RO is way too big, and you've got problems. Okay, that means your antenna material is made of something that's really not very nice. I know that some people like to make antenna materials, antennas out of strange materials like welding rods. Okay. Those things are really resistive, the RO is really high, and you will feel heat as you're transmitting. So, use aluminum, use silver, I don't know, use gold, whatever, but something that has a really low ohmic resistance, and that's the way you'll feel less heat from your, in fact, and most of the things we're talking about right now, we're going to assume that RO is really small. It's like 0 ohms. In fact, most antennas, it's going to be like 0.005 ohms. I just made that up. But it's very small. So what's left then is the R sub R. This is the radiation resistance. This thing we want to be very high. Well, so Rich is going, why? You don't want any resistance to be high. It's just radiation resistance isn't anything you can measure with a meter. But it's an effect that when you have a radiated signal going out, it's like, well, that's the equivalent resistance as if you had measured something right there on your antenna that's equivalent to the radiation going out, okay? And so this radiation resistance, you want to be as high as possible. Well, you don't have much control over that. So there are things you can do to make that optimal. Now, the reason I'm telling you this is because when you send a signal to an antenna, You have to answer, where is a signal going? And it goes in 3 different places. First of all, yes, this is all frequency dependent, because whatever you do to the antenna is going to only be good for one frequency. Anything else, all bets are off. It may be the same with others, it may be not. But it's measured at the feed point. So at the antenna, different antennas have different feed points. On this little dipole that I made here, the feed point, which is the place on the antenna where the coax or your feed line is actually entering the coax, on this antenna is where? Don't be afraid. No one's going to shame you in this class except me. That's right. So Mark says it's right here where I made the contact between the coax and the antenna. In this antenna, that's true. The feed point is right there. And that's where I'm going to measure these different characteristics. So when I talk about feed point, this is what it is. Okay, Mark, you're so smart. How about this one? Where's the feed point here?
The feed point there?
Yeah.
Should be at the base of the antenna.
Should be, right? And I think it is too. So I think you're right. It's going to get trickier. You ready? You're on a roll. You're on a roll. Okay, so I've got this copper cactus J-pole right here. Where's the feed point on this thing?
Where you connect the coax.
So where you connect the coax. So are we seeing a pattern here, right? It's where the coax actually ends and the antenna begins. This doesn't answer Brent's question, because hopefully we'll get to that eventually one of these days. But for now, we're assuming that this point is the point where we're actually measuring these characteristics. All this resistance, all this radiation is measured here. Not here, not down here, not even over here. It's right there where the coax touches the antenna. This is the feed point. So I bring these things in hopes I don't stab anybody, Don.
What bandwidth is that for? Because that's like a flagpole. Like, it's huge.
It is huge.
Is that HF?
No, it's 2 meters.
Really? That's 2 meters?
2 meters. Yep. Okay. It's a longer story than that, but it's 2 meters. Okay. So yes, the feed point is where I'm measuring all these things, and just want us to kind of agree on what that means. Okay, so now this is a little diagram that shows what happens to the signal. If I send a signal through my coax and it meets the antenna at the feed point, well, where did it go? Well, we saying that that some of it might go out as heat. Okay, and I'm saying that that's probably very small. I haven't felt a lot of heat come out of my HT antenna or even my HF antenna a lot, I don't go up and touch my tongue to my HF antenna quite often, but there's not a lot of heat that typically goes out the antenna. So I'm thinking that there's only 2 places remaining that the antenna signal goes out the antenna. Either it gets radiated or it gets reflected. And that's what this diagram is attempting to show here. So here it hits the wall, which is the feed point, and some of the signal actually gets radiated out, and some of it gets reflected back.
And it still adds up to 1.
The reflection plus the radiation is equal to...
My 11-year-old grandson was watching over my shoulder last night as I was looking at my different slides to make sure that, I got everything right and everything. He says, "What's that, Grandpa?" Okay. I said, "Oh, it's just a little diagram that shows where the signal is going, He said, "Well, how come when it hits this wall that this one is smaller than this one that came up to the wall?" I said, "Well, part of it goes out and part of it comes back." He goes, "Oh," he says, "so the total signal is the signal going out plus the one coming back." I looked at him and went, "How old are you?" Anyway, so he has no license.
Ideally, it's 1. Again, you could have some heat loss at that point.
Right. But
Deduct 1 from one side.
so you're thinking just like my grandson. Yep. I think you're a little older than 11, but still, same kind of thought pattern. Yeah, they both add up, and they have to because it's the laws of physics, right? You can't have something for nothing. No free lunch, right? Dang. So anyway, that's kind of what this is showing us, that the signal going out is actually signal hitting the antenna. Some of it goes out, some of it gets reflected back. Now this reflected back thing is what I want to ask about.
Is that refractance?
It's reflection.
Reflection.
Right, not a refraction. That's a completely different physical animal.
Okay.
But this is a reflection. How does that happen? Why does that happen?
I don't know, that's why I'm here.
Okay, well, so let me answer you by, I hope this isn't equivalent to potty humor, but one day I was sitting in my bathtub, and as I was sitting in my bathtub, I had my little rubber ducky with me, okay? And I just took a drop of water from my finger and let it drop into the tub. And then it rippled out in these concentric circles, and it hit the wall of the tub. And what do you think happened?
Some of it came back.
Some of it reflected back to me, didn't it? Why?
Because it had no place else to go.
There's no place for that energy to go, right? I mean, some tiny bit might...
There's some restriction causing that not to go in the direction that it was flowing.
Precisely. Is that what you're going to say, Matthew?
I was going to also ask if there's something to do with impedance that causes that.
Impedance, partially. And impedance actually answers, how much more than the fact that it does. I'm just trying to find out, why this happens at all, okay? And it's because, not my rubber duck, because it's floating off into distance over here, but instead, it's my little droplet, and it's that wall. It's like nothing is allowing that energy to go through it. If I hit it with a hard enough drop of water, will it go through that wall of my tub?
Your bathtub will end in your neighbor's house.
Maybe my neighbor's house, yeah, okay. But I'm still going to get a lot of reflection back, aren't I?
Depends on the size of
The splash?
Splash.
I hit the hot water hard, bam! And it went with a big splash against the tub, and it came back to me, okay? But of course, by that time, my mother came on, what's going on in here, right? I'm going, don't look!
Depends on the size of the neighbor, then.
Okay, so
It all depends.
we digressed. Dear Carol? Just scratching your ear? Okay, all right, good, good. All right.
So the antenna, let's say, if that were the most efficient, super efficient antenna, would the whole wave go through? Is there any a point where you have no feedback, or is there always going to be because of the medium it's traveling through can't do it efficiently 100%?
So Jeremy asked, if this was a very efficient antenna, wouldn't we see a lot more of the wave go through it than reflect back? Number one, we are going to reserve the discussion of efficiency for another time. Okay. Number two, it is a very important thing, and it does not answer what's going on here. So efficiency, if I answer with a yes, I'd be wrong. If I answer with a no, I'd be wrong. So it's a discussion more than.
We'll answer that later.
Yeah, you're actually on the right track on that one, okay? But it's not quite like that.
Okay.
So yeah, thanks, Jeremy. I saw another hand. Did you scratch your head there, Jackson? You're always scratching your head, right? Wait, it's a question. No, there's a question. All right, fine. There you go again. Nikki, can you control your son? All right. So, at any rate, so this is just a quick little diagram. So it answers what the antenna will do with the signal. And remember, there's three things that the antenna will do with your signal. And number one, it radiates power. It converts the AC into radio waves. Number two, it absorbs it. In other words, like the R sub O, right, the ohmic resistance, it turns it into heat. And number three, it reflects it back to the transceiver. Is it, go ahead, Daryl. Dakota?
So is the difference between the two where the standing wave ratio comes into play?
To what?
The two waves one going out and losing a little bit going back on that diagram?
So you're asking, are there any differences? What's the difference between the wave going out and a wave coming back?
I'm asking if that's kind of a very simple visualization of the standing wave ratio.
It is a very simplistic view of reflection. Okay, and what I mean by that, the standing wave ratio is not really reflected here, no pun intended, very well. Okay, it is kind of, but this part of the signal is radiation and electromagnetic. This one is electrical coming back.
Okay.
So this is a pulse coming back to the radio. Okay, Cindy Lee.
Is it the wave going back to the radio, what they say you've got to be careful of having too much of, or it'll blow your radio out?
In fact, that was my next question. I was going to ask you about that. Will this signal coming back to your radio hurt your radio? That's a trick question, by the way. I'll just announce that right now.
Can.
I see a no, 2 no's.
Both.
What's that?
Is it grounded?
Is it grounded? Let's say yes. Any more? Yes, no, maybe? Don't be afraid. I'm not going
Hurt
to.
your radio, transmitting with no antenna can hurt your radio, right?
It does, but why? That's the question we're trying to answer. Okay, so the main question is, does this signal coming back to your radio hurt your radio? Okay, I'll jump in and say, no, it won't. A reflected wave will not hurt your radio. I know it flies in the face of anybody who's got the religion called SWR. Okay, and it's just the way it is.
Then what is it that hurts your radio?
Good question. So typically what you have. Oops.
Lightning.
Yeah, pretty much. See, now I can't find that little thingy. Oh, it's on here. Let's see if it works any better. I haven't seen the.
Tilt your screen so that.
How's that? Is that better? Can you see it?
Not so much, but
Was it Randy? John? Josh. I was getting there.
there you go.
Okay. Is it okay? Okay, so every transceiver has on the output of it a power amplifier, okay? And it just means that it's just the final amplifier that just before it goes to your antenna, it's like the last final push that it boosts your signal and it sends it out to the radio, okay? But for an amateur radio, well, most radios have a power amplifier that looks, it's a MOSFET, okay? And so the MOSFET looks, and this is very simplistic, it's not exactly like this, okay? Looks kind of like this. And this is your pull-up. And none of this is accurate. If you tell anybody I drew this, I will deny it all, okay? But it's ish. Most power amplifiers look like this. It's got a MOSFET. You got, your grounded source. I was trying to say the word source. A grounded source here, okay? It's not truly grounded, but anyway. And then what you got is this guy here, and your output's coming out through there, all right? And so what happens is that I'm trying to make this as easy as possible, but what happens is that when on one part of the cycle, when you've got a signal coming in here and it's being amplified through this guy, and it's on the rising edge of the cycle, then this thing will go higher and higher in voltage until it needs to reach a maximum, and then when it's time to go to the other side of the cycle, then it needs to bleed off. And so when it comes to the other side of the cycle, it wants the voltage to go down, and you want the voltage to go down here. Okay. The problem is that instead of having the voltage, so here's your AC voltage, and you want your AC voltage to look like this coming out. Okay. Unfortunately, what happens is that instead of doing this, it gets to this point, rises up, but instead of coming down, there is no place for this current in here to go. Okay, and if you know how inductors work and electrical blah, 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 then in order for it to bleed off its current, because it can't do it instantaneously, in order for it to bleed off its current, its voltage has to rise, and it rises and rises and rises. And when it does, then it reaches a maximum, let's just say that it's like 50 volts, okay? And that 50 volts, see if this works now. Yeah. So there, in your MOSFET, there is a voltage maximum called the VDS, between the voltage between the drain and source. And if that voltage is ever exceeded, at least by 20%, then what happens is this thing will just go into lockdown. Okay, it's like bricking. It's like you bricked your MOSFET. When you do that, there's no getting out of it because your internal BJT will latch and blah 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 blah. It goes into avalanche. Pardon me?
Is that when the smoke comes out?
Sometimes it does. Most of the time, it will actually not smoke at all. It'll just simply die because it goes into latch. And when the BJT latches and you go into avalanche, then all of a sudden this thing is like, I can't handle it anymore, because it's a self-protection mechanism, which is kind of dumb because you got to replace it anyway. So when it does that, then suddenly your voltage, which is risen to on the other side of the cycle, has no place to go. The current, has no place to go, and then suddenly you've gone into avalanche. This thing is gone, and you got to go out and buy a new output. So it's not because so much of the reflected signal coming back, it's because the impedance is too high. And so because there's no place for the current to go, okay? And that's the open circuit case. When you have nothing connected like you were talking about, and you transmit it on your radio, it's like, oh, I forgot to put the antenna on, put it back on, now it doesn't work anymore. Why not? It's because of this. So anyway, forget everything I said. Don't talk to the purists. You know, I mean, this is a terrible diagram, but this is generally how your transceiver works. Your VDS gets exceeded, you're done for. You got to replace your power amplifier. And then there's the low impedance case 2, where it works kind of like this, only different. But what happens is you end up actually shorting out your MOSFET, and that also is not very good for it. It doesn't like getting shorted out, especially when there's a lot of current going through it. So
when you have all that reflected signal coming back,
yeah,
is it effectively the same thing as not having anywhere to transmit, though?
When the reflected signal comes back, okay, then what you've got is a foldback circuit, and the foldback takes care of that. So you have really no danger from your reflected signal at all. In fact, it's very small compared to your VDS. It's just like, it's not going to hurt that much, okay?
But that's because the circuit's built into the radio.
That's right.
To protect that, okay.
Yeah.
I guess theoretically, though, when that comes back, is that effectively the same thing as not having anywhere to go? Assuming all that protective circuitry wasn't there. Like when there's pure signal coming out, if there's nowhere to go.
If you design your thing wrong and don't give it any place to go, then yeah. Typically, it's not hard to design an output circuit for that kind of thing, but yeah, I suppose so. Most modern transceivers I know don't get affected by that, and your reflected signal won't even touch your radio at all. Sir, Wade.
I could use a little more explanation on this animated diagram here.
Okay, good, simple stuff.
What is the vertical line?
This is my feed point for my antenna, where my electrical signal or my feed line meets the antenna. So here's my electric signal on my coax, and it's meeting my antenna right there. And after that, this is what gets radiated, and then this is what gets sent back on my electrical line, my transmission line.
Thank you.
But it's actually exaggerated over what the actual is, right?
Everything I'm saying in here is exaggerated.
No, but the amount coming back of the reflection would be minimal.
Well, you hope, right? If it was an open circuit, like whoever it was brought it up over here, then what would it look like?
It'd be almost equal to what's going out.
Yeah, okay, it would not what's going out, but what's going to it, right? So this height of this thing would be, what's that? Same thing, but inverted. Yeah, not very nice to your radio. Okay, but again, your circuit can take care of that. So I saw a hand, Michael.
Just to clarify too,
Yeah.
the opposite case, the optimal case that we're trying to achieve
Yeah.
is that you get little or none reflection.
That's right.
All propagation or all.
That's right. Yeah, if you have everything going out, that's the ideal case. Absolutely. So thank you.
So just a question on that feed point
Yeah.
too. Does it switch from the center conductor to the shield? Is that where common mode begins? Is where that reflection is, or is it still all on?
Whoa, okay, we just asked 3 questions at the same time. So I'm kind of, processing them all. For one thing, okay, it is the place, like on this dipole here, it is the place where my coax meets my dipole. It's got shield and center conductor both, right? Okay. Now where common mode current begins, that's a whole different question, and we're going to address that, just not this very second. And I won't even begin to answer the third question. Okay, Cindy Lee.
How would you tweak or fix or stop that reflective?
Buy a new antenna. No, there's things you can do. Yeah, well, buy an antenna.
Do you do it on your radio? Do you straighten your coax? Do you move your antenna? All of the above?
There's a bunch of things you can do to reduce the amount of reflection coming back from the feed point. Okay, and we'll talk about that.
Do you need to?
Talk about that? You mean reduce the amount of reflection?
Yeah, because earlier you said it really doesn't matter, that's something.
No.
Signal, because your signal going out minus the reflection coming back, right?
Yeah.
So
So your next signal going out is going to be less than your initial one because of your reflection.
So we want to make use of all our signal going out, okay? So you want to reduce,
Oh, I get it.
you want to make this signal out here. See this little blip going out there?
it's
You
smaller.
want that blip to be bigger. Okay, however, but keep that thought in mind because we're coming back to that actually in just a few seconds. Still. Okay, we're coming back to that because that's an important point. What Wade asked just now is an important concept that I want everybody to understand, just not this very second. We'll get to it. Well, in fact, in about 20 seconds. So, you just did. No, go ahead, please.
Is it just to clarify a question you was asked a moment ago?
Yeah, sure.
The reflection that comes back
Yes.
usually comes back, or most of it comes back on the center conductor, not the shield.
So these things are traveling on a transmission line, so they're coming back on both.
Well,
Okay,
that's true.
right. Okay, so, well, because you have AC, right? It goes in through one, comes back through the other. On the other half cycle, it comes back on the other. So that means they're going on both, right? Okay, good question. What's your name?
Joe.
Joe. We got 4 Joes in here. See who we had? We got 3 Marks, 4 Joes.
2.5 Matthews.
Yeah, we got 2.5 Matthews. Good point. Yeah, man.
The important thing is we only have one nosy.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to prevent that from. That's why we're holding this class. John.
Would you explain again what he said a while ago about the impedance mismatch?
We're getting to that actually.
You said that it does have some effect, but
Yes.
it doesn't have the whole effect.
That's true. It doesn't have the entire effect, but
Okay, that's all you said. Right?
yeah, pretty much. But we're going to explain the whole effect here in just a few seconds. But good, yeah. I hope I'm not lying to you. I mean, I tell people a lot of.
From a certain point of view. It's only lying if it's on purpose.
Well, I don't know. I tell a lot of lies and. Yeah, I tell a lot of purposeful lies that go back and say, "Oh, what I said was." Anyway, so. I'd make a good politician, wouldn't I? All right. So about signal reflection, then, the reflected signal returns to the transceiver. Now, I want you to keep in mind that how does it return to the transceiver? Well, it returns to it like Joe, right? I'm always safe if I just say Joe. Because there's 2 Joes right in my line of sight right there, see? It returns to it on the coax. So your transmission line that sends it out, of course it comes back on that same one, but it is re-reflected by the transceiver. Well, that means that the reflected signal we saw in that little diagram goes back to your radio, but the radio will take it and reflect it right back out to your antenna again. Well, wait a minute.
With additional loss, correct?
Where's the loss come from? What?
That mirror isn't perfect mirror, right?
Wire.
Exactly. It's the coax because coax has loss. Okay, and I want you to understand that the only loss, if we assume that the antenna's R sub 0 is very small because it's just made of good material like aluminum or wet paper, I don't know, but things like that, then it's going to have very, very low loss in the antenna itself. Your loss is going to come from your coax. That's where your greatest loss is coming from. Long time ago, like 60 years ago, people didn't talk about SWR. Why not? What? Well, I heard a very key. What was that, Clarence? Because they didn't use coax. Okay, it wasn't until we started using this stupid stuff that we started worrying about SWR. Well, shouldn't we always have to worry about the SWR? I mean, why is it now? I mean, has the laws of physics changed?
It was balanced, right?
You're using
The feed line was
balance.
balanced before, so it couldn't radiate back on the outside of it.
That actually answers the question about what Joe was talking about regarding another Joe. See, I'm pretty safe. Regarding common mode current. Okay, it doesn't say anything about reflection or SWR, but good half answer.
There was enough loss that it was just not a fact. Anything coming back would come back.
They use twin lead instead of coax.
That's right. They used twin lead and window line and open wire line, which had how much loss?
A lot.
Almost none.
Almost none. That's
See, the loss is what makes us worry about SWR. Okay, because the higher the SWR, the more loss you have because you have more reflections and things. Well, back in those days, you see, what happened is you didn't have any loss, and so it's like, who cares if you had reflection because it reflected, you reflected out, reflected back, forth. Well, it just,
It would go back out.
that's right, it would just go right back out.
So did it not have loss though because the feed line itself was radiating the signal?
No, it was just had no loss. Well, very low loss, yeah. I hope your feed line isn't radiating as any signal. In fact, that's also a common mode current. We'll talk about that for sure. Yeah, so these things, coax,
Explain again, why doesn't it not have loss?
because it's just because of the characteristics of how it was made and material it's made from, you know, the way it is, the impedance, the way it's, the geometry makes it so it has such little loss, okay? And that's just the way it is.
And is that loss, is that the R1 you had in the antenna model? Is it?
That's the antenna. We're talking about the coax now, okay? So, and this is a little bit of a,
Well, you got the wide one, that's
so,
the skinny one, like,
what's the word I'm trying to think of? It's a distraction, but I'll say it anyway, okay? So if you have coax, here's my coax like this, right? All right, and we typically model coax by this. This is a coil. There we go. And okay, so coax is typically modeled like this here, where you have an inductor, your capacitor, and this is your resistance that's in the wire, and this is your conductance. And the conductance, so if you measure resistance between these two wires, how much resistance is in there? Well, they better not be touching at all, right? So, I mean, this got to be like billions, right?
Okay.
So that means the conductance is almost zero.
Right.
And the resistance is almost zero.
Okay, right.
Yeah, and so your impedance of your coax is going to equal to about this. It's like R plus J omega L over G plus J omega C. Okay, and so this is where the capacitance and the inductance of the coax comes in. Well, but if this is zero, okay, then all that's left is this. Well, these two J's cancel, the frequency cancels, and all that's left then is simply that. And this is what defines the impedance of the coax. All right, that's how we get the impedance. And in fact, if you can see, if you look at this, what you'll notice right off is that this is frequency independent. So the impedance of the coax doesn't even depend on frequency at all, to a point. I mean, the purest, to a point. So this is kind of where we get that from. But to answer your question then, the loss, well anyway, the loss is not just explained by this. This is simply the ohmic resistance that we're talking about here.
Makes sense.
Was there another hand? Okay.
Well, just a comment of
Yeah.
the frequency doesn't matter, at least for all those of which we're concerned about.
Within
Within that window,
yeah.
0 to what?
Well, you have to go to the to the manufacturer, and the manufacturer of the coax, they'll tell you, well, this is pretty good from 400 kilohertz to like 500 megahertz, something like that, right? Then they'll tell you, you can know for where this is reasonable, and that's how you know.
Again, it would change if you're talking about terahertz or it's way out there at the far end of the spectrum.
This is RG8X, and I think that this is probably only good to about 600 megahertz. Okay, and these connectors on here are PL259s, which are only good to about 500 megahertz. So,
Again, relevance to the range in which we're discussing.
Yeah. I mean,
if you go out somewhere else and you need different connectors, different wire, different.
Yeah, amateur radio is the hobby of ish. So yeah, that's exactly right. All right. So and then once it's been re-reflected by the transceiver, the signal returns to the antenna. Well, if the signal returns to the antenna, well then there's no problem, right? It hits out there, it's reflected back, but it gets reflected back again. Well, there's still some mismatch on the antenna, so it gets reflected back. But each time it gets smaller and smaller and smaller until all the signal gets sent out to the antenna. Wait, is that true? Yes, it's true. How do I know this? Because I went to school for umpteen years, that's why I know. But it's because there's a guy named Walter Maxwell, and he wrote a book called Reflections. It's famous. In fact, at the U, it's required reading by electrical engineers. At BYU, thank heavens it wasn't. But that's okay because at the University of Arizona it was. So anyway, this book by Walter Maxwell is like the Bible of reflections. In fact, he wrote this entire book on this. It's like 305 pages long on just reflection. Just reflections is what he wrote about. Okay, it's so important because people miss it, and there's so much to know about how reflections work, and more importantly, how they don't work, because it's full of myths. And we, in the amateur community, because of Facebook and other things like that, we love to propagate myths. That's what we do. We tell our friends all these, these false things that we learn, and we preach it as gospel. Well, But all your signal, this is what I want to impress upon you, all of your signal will eventually go out your antenna. All of it. Except what is eaten up by your coax as heat. That's right. So that means your only loss is through your coax. Yeah, just go back and forth, back and forth. Only loss is in the coax. Now, some of you guys might have worked in the broadcast industry. I'm sorry. I mean, I'm not that you work there, but I'm sorry that of this next thing that I have to impress upon you. But there is one term called return loss. Okay? In fact, many people in the broadcast industry live and die by this term return loss. Because what it tells them is, if I get any reflected signal at all, that's loss. That's signal I can't use. That's a false notion. However, it is an important parameter, because return loss also tells you how you can adjust your antenna to make maximum output. Well, if
your return loss less.
That's right. Well, so if if all my reflected signal goes back out again, why do we even care about loss?
Because you want to make it count the first time through.
Why?
So you can radiate that.
Is it out of phase?
Not out of phase. We'll talk about that another time. It's because what happens is that each time it goes traveling down the coax, comes back, there's loss. Back and forth. If you just have it do it just one time and get it over with, you have the loss in the coax and say, okay, we're done. Okay, that's why you want to minimize that. And return loss kind of helps you understand how much to keep your reflections down. I just hate the term return loss because it tells them it means that what gets returned is lost. It's not. At least not completely. So, anyway, preach, preach, preach. All right. Now, as I mentioned before, we measure the impedance of our antenna at the feed point, and our feed point impedance is measured by a complex number. We represent that by Z, so that's our impedance, and it stands for R plus JX. J is simply the imaginary unity. In elementary school, you might have seen it as a little I, which is like the square root of -1, right? That's our imaginary unity. And so this complex number tells us that the real part, R, is the resistance. The X part is called the reactance. And in a second, I'll tell you why that even matters. Because we're just trying to understand antennas. Why the heck is all this stuff, right? Okay, it's because we want to minimize both on our feed point. Okay, so it doesn't typically equal the feed line impedance. Our feed line impedance, ideally, when we look at a piece of coax, it should be 50 ohms. Okay, and as close as we get to a good manufacturer to make one, it should be 50 ohms, which is 50 plus J ohms. In other words, the resistance equals 50. And when I say resistance, of course, I mean this. It's not truly an R, right? It comes out of the L and the C. So it's kind of a fake resistance. But still, it's the R part, because the imaginary part has been totally canceled. However, because it's a 0 ohms reactive, well, this is like a perfect resistor for a long ways. Kind of. If you hooked it up to an ohm meter, what would you read on this? Yeah, it would be actually infinite, because they're not connected. I mean, they're not shorted out. So it should be infinite ohms between them. At least that's what I would gather. If your meter shows different, let me know. You might have to get a different meter. But yeah, so the coax is just an open circuit in DC wise. In AC, in other words, at RF frequencies, it's going to be 50 ohms. That's why we call it that. So 50 ohms is what it is. But our antenna rarely is 50 ohms. If it is, it's like, hallelujah, the crops are saved, no reflection, and everything's all done, okay? Except for the loss in the feed line.
So if you're using like, I mean, for different applications, you're gonna use different types of coax. Like there's a 75 ohm coax. Would that work on some antennas or?
I get that question a lot, you know?
RG6 work. Yeah, that's 75.
So the RG6 is 75, and so is like, you know, yeah, RG, thank you. I'm trying to think of the other one. So, and the question always comes up, I've got this spool of, you know, RG59 that got left from my previous, you know, house owner. Can that work for amateur radio? The answer is yes, it can. Well, wait a minute. Am I telling you false doctrine again?
No, you have to have an adapter somewhere.
75 ohm.
Adjust.
It's working. Let's find out. So now the way I remember how to figure out my SWR, okay, is simply that I've got my impedance divided by, oops. How did she do that? Ah, just like that. Okay, you know what? There we go. So this Z naught is my characteristic impedance. This Z is my impedance of my other coax, okay? If this other coax is going to be 75 ohms, okay, and I know my coax is going to be 50 ohms, that's going to go at 1.5 to 1 SWR. Is that a good one?
Yes, it's doable.
Sure.
Best I get.
I mean, yeah, I mean, if I was getting 1.5, I'd be happier than a pig in the mud. Okay, so yeah, it would work for me. So the answer is yes, it would work for you. You know, it's not ideal because then you've got other things adding up to it, like what's your antenna impedance? Well, then if that adds to this and your SWR gets higher, you're going, but my antenna was measuring at 1.5 to 1 just a while ago. What's wrong now? Well, maybe your coax threw it off. So your coax, if it's not right on, your antenna had better be. So one of those two should be pretty close.
I know when you're using, I think it's I could be wrong, J8, when you're using automotive, you're not going a long enough length, so for 2 meters, perfectly fine.
Okay.
But I learned the hard way that you can't put it on your roof. When I first set up my antenna, I put my thin coax on the roof, and I got nothing. And then it says you got the wrong cable, because the cable had to be a lot thicker diameter to be able to transmit.
Okay. I have no idea, but I'll go along with that.
Another question on this.
Yeah, Joe.
Between non-standard
Yeah, sure.
or other alternatives.
Yeah.
Would you also wind up with either more heat in the wire, either frequency and or output wattage?
I'll have you answer that. Well, we haven't talked enough to answer that question, but I'll just say that.
Just because of the mismatch, you're going to end up either pushing the 75 ohm harder, which is going to create more heat.
So I was going to have you answer that, but we haven't talked enough about this to have you answer it for us. So I'll answer it for you. And it's because of this, okay? It's because of Z equals L over C, okay? Right, this right here. Neither of those generate heat. They're reactive components, which don't generate any heat ideally, okay? They might have resistive leads, that sort of thing, but that's about it. So answer is no, they won't generate any heat. In fact, do you ever see your coax get warm? I haven't. I guess it's possible if I got a problem, but typically they don't get warm. Okay, so heat doesn't come from your coax.
And how does your frequencies, does that change on that? Do you have more loss if you go up to?
And the answer to that, because this does not take into account loss. Loss changes drastically with frequency. And how? Up or down?
Goes up.
Higher the frequency, the greater the loss in the wrong cable.
The higher the frequency, the greater the loss. In fact, it goes up dramatically. Yeah, I mean, this is RG8X. You know, at 2 meters, this is already at 4.5 dB, per 100 feet, and that's a lot of loss. Okay, we go up to 70 centimeters. This thing's almost useless. I do it anyway because it's a lot of fun. But anyway, so yeah, the higher.
Or have a really short.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Short then.
Yeah, if it's short, it won't matter a whole lot. So yeah, absolutely. Alrighty. So the feed point doesn't match the feed line. We say that they are mismatched. And you know, all the time you're going to have your antenna not exactly match 50 ohms. Okay, it just won't ever happen in your lifetime, at least not in mine. So when they don't, then there could be a small mismatch or a large one. You hope it's not a large one, but if there is a large mismatch between the two, what can you do about it? Like that's what Cindy was asking. What?
Isn't that what a tuner is for?
That's what a tuner is for. However, a tuner only does part of the job. And we'll get to that too.
A
And
tuner hides it, right?
kind of.
It does some adaptations on it.
It makes your radio happy.
Yeah.
Oh, please don't ever say that again.
I hear that, but when I use a tuner,
Yeah.
I'm receiving better than when I don't have it.
Yes.
So that has nothing to do with my transmission, but I'm hearing better.
About 4 years ago, I wrote an article on that very thing because people were saying, does a tuner help me receive better? And the answer is yes, it can, depends. Oh. So, yes, it can. All right.
My ears tell me that it does.
It can. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, just a sec.
Moving on.
This is not the tuner you're looking at. So, yeah. So, tuners answered part of the question, and in fact, we will get into that. And when you say make your radio happy, so remember I was talking about when I said that the signal reflection won't hurt your radio, okay? So it's not that it makes your radio happy or unhappy. It has no emotion. But what it does do is it helps your radio to not go into foldback. And when it doesn't go into foldback, then it's able to put out full power. Or conversely, if it senses that there's a high amount of reflection coming back or there's an impedance mismatch, then what it does is it says, whoa, wait a minute. If my SWR is above 2.0, then suddenly it starts to reduce its power output, right? So if you want full power output, then if that makes your radio happy, then go for it. But I just don't like that term because not too many radios have emotions. Maybe yours, I'm not speaking for your radio. So, but yeah, a tuner does help, and that's only part of the equation. There's another hand over here. Joe.
So what's the difference between a tuner and just an impedance matching transformer?
Man, we haven't even got there yet. Okay, fine. I'll get there right now. How's that? Okay, well, let's see. First, we got to talk about resonance. Yeah, this is very pertinent to what you're asking about. Let me just mention this quick, and then we'll jump over to your tuner thingy, since everybody loves to talk about tuners, apparently. Okay, so the definition of antenna resonance, though, is that your imaginary component is zero. In other words, your reactance, okay, is all zero. The effect that came from the inductor and the capacitor in your antenna all canceled out. But that is only good at one frequency. There we go, capacitance at a particular frequency. I'm beating my own slides. All right. So it doesn't really mean just because your reactance is zero that your antenna will work well, because a dummy load, right, has zero reactance as well. It's purely resistive, but it's resonant. And resonance, when your antenna is resonant, it means that you have no capacitance, no inductance. It looks like it's all canceled out by a certain frequency. So, understanding that, just know that a rubber duck is not your friend.
Unless you have nothing better.
Okay, let me just say that a rubber duck, we're getting personal out here, Aleph. So, no, that's true, and whenever I get one of these little packaged radios, from Baofeng or from Waxen or whatever, they come with these little stubby antennas. And let me just tell you, only time I'll call it an antenna is like in here or in one of our ham radio classes. To me, that's not an antenna, all right? It's just there as a 50 ohm dummy load to help you test your radio. That's all it's for. Once I get one of these packages from Baofeng, I take the antenna out, I said it again, and I just hook it across the river and be done with it, because that's not a real antenna. It's just there for testing because it's a dummy load, because the manufacturer is tired of you blowing up the radios. Because of what now?
It's there to make the radio happy.
No!
Or the PA. Keep the PA happy.
All right. Thank you, Rich. All right. So, Yeah, to me, a rubber deck, although it's resonant, you know, it's perfect 50 ohms. Just don't believe it's a great antenna. It might transmit across the room, I don't know. I mean, who in here brought a radio with him? I could see an antenna over here. Okay, Jackson, who else? Dakota. So several people, and Joe brought your antennas, right? Or your radios. Good, good. Maybe we'll try something, I don't know. But okay, so really quickly though about matching. So the imaginary, so remember there's two parts to getting things down to 50 ohms. There's the real and there's the imaginary. The imaginary part is addressed by matching. And you can do by matching circuit, like, you know, a delta or beta. A lot of these things might see on some of your antennas have a beta matching circuit. It's hard to see sometimes, okay? If you have an HF antenna, then it's done by like a pi circuit, or pi L is really popular. Well, back then. Anyway, it can be achieved by a tuner. So a tuner will get rid of the imaginary component. The tuner's job is to find the complex conjugate of your, so if your antenna is exhibiting, you know, 175, you know, plus, you know, J92 ohms, okay, then what your tuner will do is it'll say, oh, I'm going to match it. I'll see your 175 ohms, but I'm going to match it then with a negative J92 ohms. So the antenna tuner will actually present this to the line, and it'll cancel out these two here, and all that's left was the real component, because these two are gone. And that's what the tuner does. That's all the tuner does, okay? Okay, that's not quite true. It doesn't make your radio happy. And the reason it doesn't, well, it is more optimal because it gets rid of, that's right. The reason it doesn't make your radio completely happy is because this is still a problem. It still doesn't match, okay? So how do you fix that, okay? Well, that's the next part. That's the real, okay. So ATU, automatic or antenna tuning unit. This is my LDG that I love quite a bit. Works really nicely. But there's also a manual tuner, okay? And I get questions like this all the time, but which one is better? Manual or automatic? I mean, what do you think?
Manual takes a lot more work.
I like that answer. What was that I just heard?
One you know how to use.
When you know how to use. Very good. I like that.
Convenience.
And say Dakota, and then...
It depends. Depends on how often you change frequencies.
You know, and that's a very good point right there. Before we go to that, who else was saying something? There was one. Convenience. Okay, so same thing Joe was saying right there. So, you know,
Cost.
the cost is very big.
This is in the form of a question, but
Please.
be more accurate with the manual tuner.
Ooh.
And know what the automatic one's really doing.
So it can be, absolutely right. So here are some of the things there's a bunch of differences, but just for the sake of these slideshows, you know. So, which is better outside the scope of this class? Just kidding, it's user dependent. See, I didn't say depends. So anyway, so the advantages are though that an automatic tuner is easier to use. I mean, it's automatic after all. It tends to be less expensive. My LDG tuner was only this one's only $180. This Palstar, let me tell you, you're sinking $2,200 into this guy. Okay, but he'll tune a chain link fence. I mean, how often do you tune chain link fences? I don't know, but he'll tune about anything. I like this LDG because he'll do a 20-to-1, all right, where this one will do like 120-to-1. Really, really nice tuner. I don't know how it does it because it's such a small box and you need something this big. Anyway, but it does a great job. It's a well-known tuner. Also, an automatic tuner is just simply good enough for most amateur uses. I have several automatic tuners and they just work wonderfully, all right? However, a manual tuner can be more accurate. But if close is good enough, why do you need to be right on the money? So it helps, it's good. It helps to be more accurate, it's true. It's got a wider range. In other words, with a manual tuner, you can often service a greater range of frequencies than you can with an automatic tuner. That's becoming less and less true because some of the newer automatic tuners can tune the world. So that's becoming less an issue. What was your name, sir?
My name's Travis.
Hey, Travis, welcome.
Thank you. What were the names of those again?
Well, this one is an LDG AT200 Pro 2. LDG. This one's a Palstar, P-A-L-S-T-A-R. And Palstar makes the very best tuners in the world.
Would you have less line loss if the automatic tuner is at the feed point, which is say on your roof, versus sitting on your desk? Does that make a difference?
It does. And I don't want to say the D word, but you know, so thank you. So it can have a different kind of effect depending on how you use it and so forth. So yes, it can.
Because you would potentially be putting your loss on the far end as opposed to letting it all come back. Is that accurate?
We don't want to climb on our house every time we change.
No. So if you had an automatic tuner.
Yeah. So what was your first name again? John. 4 Johns. Okay. So like an ICOM H4 is an automatic tuner that sits way by the antenna. Okay. And those are completely automatic. You don't have to touch it or anything. It's rainproof and so forth. And they work really nicely, okay, so you don't have to go worry about going out there to retune. Still, there are issues to worry about when you have an automatic tuner that's far away. Yes, it can reduce losses between it and the antenna because you have that little less coax to worry about.
So you're really tuning your antenna at that point. 'Cause it's
Exactly. Dude, how'd you get in this class? That's genius. That's exactly right. Going back to Maxwell in his Reflections book, okay, when you get that close to the antenna, suddenly you become part of the antenna. That tuner does, okay? Not you personally, John. But yeah, the tuner does become part of it. And as it does, it starts coupling with that antenna, and those two become one. And suddenly the loss is like not even part of the equation anymore. But that's way beyond the scope of what we're talking about here. So it's like varies. Thanks. So yes, sir.
So
Wade.
would a tuner pick up from after you've physically adjusted it as much as you can? Meaning as you're trying to get the best signal possible,
Yes.
do you adjust your coax and adjust your antenna and everything the best you can within the limits of how high you can get it and the best place to place it and all that? And then this picks up to make it the best after you've made your manual adjustments?
You're asking whether the manual tuner can do...
No, not the manual tuner.
So I'm not...
Physically tuning it by moving it around.
Moving your antenna around?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
And then
By adjusting your antenna.
adjusting your antenna. And then if you can't get it perfect, then you would use one of these to get it the rest of the way to great.
Okay, so to answer that, we're going to actually close with that very demonstration on my dipole. Okay? So let me just say, I'll just throw off one more slide just to complete that thought and to go to that dipole here, okay? Because the real part of it, that 170 whatever, is addressed then by an RF transformer, like a Ballon, 4-to-1, 9-to-1, 49, whatever, these Ballon types. Okay, so these things are what's going to address this guy here. So you got to address both the real and the imaginary. Now, once we do that, okay, then your question starts becoming more valid. It's like, well, wait a minute. If we got all these problems with our SWR and our reflections and everything, can't we just change our antenna? You know? And the answer is, let's find out. So, let's see, I need a volunteer. John, could you volunteer, please? Because so John's going to be a good volunteer here, and he's going to hold up our antenna. There you go. And I'm going to connect this antenna coax to my analyzer after a quick drink.
You can't much past breakfast time.
You know, I'm drinking my lunch now. All right, so John is graciously and diligently holding up our antenna as I'm hooking this up. And as I do, this is a 2-meter dipole. I hope it works, but I need another volunteer. Jeremy, could you volunteer, please? So Jeremy has graciously volunteered to volunteer, and he's going to look at my analyzer here. As I power this thing up, I'm going to put this thing on SWR, and I'm going to watch 2 meters, let's see, F2. There we go. Now Jeremy is going to punch the check marks to kind of show us what the SWR across the band looks like for this antenna. Okay, go ahead and fire away. Does it look good or bad?
Looks good.
Does it?
1.2.
Whoa, so it's way down the below. Okay, why don't you show it to everybody and see what...
Oh, closest to 1?
Closest to 1. Want me to get up to the...
Well, actually, we have, next time we have this class, we're going to have some diagrams and things I'll show everybody about how good this is. Right now, we're just kind of giving an idea.
Right.
So you're voicing them.
Oh, yeah. That's the way I would say.
My lovely assistant, Jeremy,
Yeah.
will now explain what he's seeing.
I'm seeing 1.2, maybe almost 1.3 across the entire frequency range of this antenna.
Okay, very good. So we're seeing a really good SWR reading across the antenna. Well, wait a minute.
What's that range?
Wait. Well, that's the entire 2 meter band.
138 to 170?
144 to 148 megahertz. But wait a minute. What frequency are we talking about?
That's a good question. I don't know.
It's all of them.
Are we at the middle of the band?
Well, no, you're actually looking at every single point along the whole band.
Okay. Yeah.
So he's looking at every point on the 2 meter band.
Yeah. This is across the spectrum of this antenna.
Well, wait a minute.
Right?
Jeremy, now I hear people say that my 2 meter antenna has a 1.4 SWR, and your next question is going to be, at what frequency?
At what frequency?
Yeah, look at that. Took the words right out of my mouth. Okay, and so we just found out that it's not just at one frequency we're interested. We want to know the whole band, and that's what the analyzer is showing us. Now, John is going to help us demonstrate something else. John, could you please lower the antenna? Like, just drop it all the way down to your knees. You don't have to bend over. Just fold it over.
The top of the board.
Tip the board over.
Like this.
Oh, like that.
There you go. So John has now graciously tipped the board over, changed our antenna configuration. Jeremy's going to reanalyze this antenna. Jeremy, tell us what the reading is now.
Well, it starts at 1.5 at the bottom at 144 and goes up to above 2 at the end of the band.
Wait. So you're saying that part of this antenna is not as resonant as it used to be? What'd you do to my antenna, John?
The antenna is resonant at a certain frequency.
Okay.
It's the same antenna.
It's the same antenna.
Physically changed except for altitude.
Ground coupling.
So several kinds of things are happening here, right? And I'm hearing good answers from everybody. Well, everybody who's talking. So I know what you're thinking, Tom, and that's not right. But everybody else is correct. So yeah. So here, John has simply taken the antenna. He's lowered it. He's actually brought it closer to his body. Okay. In fact, John, why don't you go ahead and just give it a big hug. So John's going to hug my antenna. There he is. Okay, now Jeremy's going to reanalyze this antenna, and he's going to show us what? That John either makes a good 2 meter antenna.
John is very resonant.
Whoa.
Or, excuse me, the 10 end is more resonant, which...
So, John, with this antenna, could you please stay that way while I have it on my roof? And that way, we'll always guarantee... All right. All right, thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, John. You can go ahead and put the antenna down. You bet.
It's a parting gift.
Well, we got more to talk about on it next time. Thank you very much, Jeremy. All right, so good demonstration. All right, class is about over, but my question to you is, the antenna didn't seem to change. I mean, I didn't go and you didn't see me reach behind and my back and cut any more of the wire off or anything like that, right? So what's the difference?
Orientation changed.
Orientation did change a bit, didn't it? Yeah?
Proximity to other things that are affecting it.
Like what?
You got a metal table in front of your chair, in front of your floor.
So close to this guy, him, his body, right? Other things like that.
It interferes with the magnetic field radiating from, or no, the electrical field.
Both, right? Yeah, so you're right, yeah. So
If you stuck a magnet and run it along there, you'd get totally different readings.
I don't know, I haven't tried that, but I suppose.
Well, a magnet creates an electromagnetic field all around it.
A magnetic field.
Up to a
So
certain distance.
if I move around really fast, then it would, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, moving magnetic field next to copper creates an electrical field.
That's true. Yeah, we ever tried that in a copper tube and just drop a magnet inside of it? That's fun. Because it goes thunk. That's way cool. Anyway, so, yes, sir.
You know, it's very, if you go out and you do fox hunting, they do body shielding, and that's exactly what's happening with that.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you are using a directional antenna and you stand between it, you can actually block.
That is a very good point, because what you just now witnessed, where's John? There he is. That was counterproductive. Okay, what he did was he added to the antenna. He wasn't hiding anything. We could see your whole body, John, because of that antenna, all right? Okay, who in here said they had a radio? Was it Matthew? Jackson, that's what it was. Okay, Jackson. Okay, I'm going to use Jackson because he's clear across the room. And I'm going to hook up my radio as a parting gift. You're not going to take my antenna, but you can at least listen to it. And I'm going to hook up my radio. This is a Baofeng AR5RM to my little dipole. I don't even know if it works. I haven't tried it till now. I'm just hoping, because Jeremy promised me that the SWR was really low. So I'm going to assume that he's telling me the truth. So here we go. You know, I never learned my lesson. I should hook up the pigtail first and then put the thing in later, right? I mean, I end up doing that with my HF radio. I plug it in, I have to turn the entire radio around. You know, it's terrible. All right, so I'm going to turn it on. Can you go to the National Simplex? Oh, okay, yeah. So Mark was, thanks for the correction. So can you go to the National Simplex, please, Jackson? There we go. So my orientation, notice that it's horizontal. I'm on the National Simplex.
Hi, Najee. This is KK7M&M.
I hear you. This is KN0JI. You hearing me?
Yeah, making the long trip across the room.
7-3, KN0JI. All right, so it works. Yay. Okay, so we have a dipole that actually works. Anyway.
Put it just face down on the floor. There we go.
Okay, Jackson, Joe wants me to put it down on the floor, but I can't bend down that low. How's my signal? You turned your radio off already?
Still good.
Oh, is it still? Oh, you can. I can't hear you. Can you hear me?
Yep, you're still coming through.
No, it's about time. We've been waiting. KN0JI. Okay, so it seems to work. I mean, this close proximity, you know, we...
Is that what
proximity change?
Is that what rubber duckies are for? That's just this.
Pretty much. Thanks, that's a good point.
You talked about orientation. You've always had it R horizontal, but if you're turning it vertical, how's that going to change your? Is that going to change your readings or the effectiveness of the antenna? We talked about that earlier when you were doing the presentation. Depending upon your orientation, you're going to have a different response. If both the transmitter and the receiver are both horizontal, well, what if one is horizontal and one is vertical? How's that going to change it?
The performance will change up to about 10 dB, approximately. You know, it's hard to notice that in this small room, but in all reality, it's about 10 dB, the difference in orientation. Thanks, everybody. Next week, it's at 10 a.m. I'll repeat that, 10 a.m. in this same room. 10 a.m. 10 a.m.
Next Saturday.
Next Saturday.